Hello and welcome to another video on V-Rising. I am very excited about this one. I have interviewed Jeremy Fielding, Community Manager for V-Rising. Before we get into that, I'd just like to say that SLS have given me a couple of game keys for V-Rising and some keys for the Sinister Evolution pack, which I'll be giving away in my Discord server. So if you're interested in snagging one of those, go down to the description, click the Discord link, and once you're on my server, you can find a channel called V-Rising Giveaway that has all the information you'll need. Alright, that's all I had to say. Now let's get into my interview with Jeremy Bearson, Fielding, Community Manager for V-Rising. So today I have the pleasure of talking to Jeremy Fielding, right?
Yeah, that's Jeremy Fielding, known probably more commonly as Jeremy Bearson or
Yes.
Jeremy.
That's why I was a little bit on the fence about it, because I've always known you as Jeremy Bearson. But Jeremy, you are the community manager at Stonlock Studios for V-Rising. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. Big fan, longtime fan of the Battle Right profile.
Yeah, those were the days. So how are you doing today?
I'm doing really good. Yeah. A little sleepy. Being in Sweden, it's kind of tough. Your sun never goes down. I haven't seen nighttime in a while. But yeah, no, it's good. I've been having a really good time over here.
Yeah, I remember I talked to some of the North American Battle Right players when they were here for the Season 1 LAN of that, and they had the same thing to say, that it's so bright here. The sun never goes down. And
yeah, it's funny because Sweden's not exactly known for being the sunshine, the warm sunshine area.
No,
but
it's the rainy sunshine area.
Yeah.
But yeah, so you're the community manager, and some might say that that title explains itself a little bit. But for those of us who aren't into like game development, what does a community manager do? How do you manage us?
It's funny because I think at like every company, community manager has a different job or a different series of jobs. You know, it's a very it's like a very broad area, and it's really dependent on what kind of game you are. For V Rising, it's I just do I consider to like bake it down to as simple as possible. I think my job is to make sure that the players are being heard by the studio, like that in a way that devs can't spend like all their time looking at feedback, because it actually takes a very long time to like look through and gather feedback. So the devs can continue to do their jobs while also understanding what people want and what they expect, and that in turn, kind of the players understand what to expect from us. Because I think one of the most important things that you can do as trying to act as that bridge between the devs and the community is make players understand who we are, what we are capable of, and what we are trying to do. Like understand us from like sort of a human perspective. So yeah, that's kind of what I view my job as.
So I was going to get into this a little bit later, but since you're touching on it now, V-Rising has gone into early access, and I'm guessing a big part of the reason why you go into early access is you want to build up that player base and get that community feedback during the remainder of the development. So how do you specifically, because I'm taking it then that you're the one gathering most of that in, right? How does that come from us blurting out what we think about the game to some of it actually turning into changes in the game?
Okay, yeah. So there are a lot of channels. Like I try to have a lot of channels to gather feedback from. We have like we see our comments on dev blogs, we see comments in the Steam forums, we see comments on social media. Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. We have our Discord, which is our most sort of engaged users. I think are mostly there. And we have a bunch of feedback channels we have there that we are constantly going through, responding to people in general chat. I still have like all my old beta Discords open, and I go through them all the time. So the sort of step is gathering what I think are sort of like general ideas. There's different communities within V-Rising. Like there are different, people who have different focuses on different parts of the game. And I think it's really important to one, understand where your feedback is coming from, like understand like who is saying this and what their perspective is, and then balance that against the perspectives of like other people. And obviously some people's interests sort of have a different weight on like if I'm looking for specifically how a spell feels in PvP, I'm not going to be like focusing on the people who have never played on a PvP server, right?
Yeah.
So it's important to be able to distinguish where this stuff is coming from, and then sort of find common pain points. And the thing that I look for, like a lot of people, when they send you feedback, what they send you is a solution to what they perceive as a problem.
Yeah.
And you look at that solution and you say like, okay, maybe. But the thing is, what I'm trying to get from those is not necessarily what the solution to this problem of this like symptom of an issue is, but what the deeper underlying issue is that may be causing more issues in other places, and can we find the common pain points and instead find a way to address them in like a more elegant and functional manner than just sort of like band-aid fixing a bunch of little spots, instead of trying to like fix all the like leaky little holes in the boat. Instead, maybe like it's time to replace the hull. It's time to like, put on a bigger patch that fixes more things at once and is faster to do.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's all about finding what's frustrating people and trying to bake that down for the devs to see, and then them taking that information and turning it around in a way that they think is reasonable. We test that out, we see how it feels internally, and then we push it out. Sometimes we have time to like test it a little bit with actual players, which can be nice, and try to push it out in as functional way that doesn't break other stuff as possible. So yeah, that's sort of how the feedback loop works, is getting a broad perspective, understanding where the feedback is coming from, finding the common pain points, and then trying to come up with good solutions for those.
All right. But you were, back in the Battlerite days, you were a part of the Battlerite community. That's where I first saw you.
Yeah, that's where I got kind of started my experience with SLS. Well, I mean, I played Bloodline Champions back in the day, sort of casually. But yeah, in Battlerite, I did tournaments for NA. That's how I ended up meeting some people like Grimgoon, and ended up kind of meeting SLS. Yeah, and I started very much as just like a community person. I didn't actually work directly with SLS or directly for SLS until 2018. I was like hired on part-time to manage their Discord.
Yeah.
I did that for about a year.
And how early on in V-Rising's production did you become a part of that team?
I think they were in production, I think, for a year and a half or 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
They contacted me and asked if I'd be interested in applying for the community manager. It wasn't like, here's the job. It was like, hey, like, we think you might be a good fit. You should apply. That was a little bit after, I think it was a little bit before they announced it, actually. So like it was pretty well into production before I joined.
And how do you feel like that's a benefit for you, coming from a community that's so close to the company that you work for, and now managing that community? Or what's that like, that transition?
I mean, yeah, because I think it's an interesting perspective, kind of being on like the other side of it and then coming in. And because I feel like it gives me a good idea of like what it's like to be on the other side, and like what it looks like you're getting compared to like what you are getting. Because I feel like back in the Battlerite days, it felt like there was kind of a disconnect between like who SLS was and like, because I actually knew people on the team, back in the day, and then like how they kind of came across to like average players. I felt like there was sort of like a disconnect back then, because like what I would see compared to like what most people would see, I feel like it was asymmetrical. It wasn't accurate. So the most important thing for me is that I think I really gained a huge appreciation for trying to be as direct and like honest and straightforward as possible. Like I'm not saying they were dishonest back then or anything, but I think it just wasn't presented in the right way.
Yeah.
I think like radical honesty and trying to be as open as possible, because like the people here are good, and like I think they're good. I think what they're trying to do good and makes sense, and generally they're very reasonable. So I think if you generally just present that as like it is, like how they are, uh, it works because like there's no like trying to trick anybody. It's just like not try just communicating that properly. So being able to be on the other side and know what it feels like when it isn't communicated properly, I think is a huge benefit.
Yeah.
I know what not to do.
Yeah, and I agree with that take. You know, I didn't know people very well, but I was at the season one LAN and I met some of the
Hmm.
people there. I talked to the community manager at the time and Bocado doing the esports stuff. Talked to him fairly much, and
Yeah.
I I felt the same way when I read a lot of the critical voices towards SLS at that time. I felt like it just
Hmm.
didn't match my experience, but yeah, it's different perspectives. Um, so early access hit, and it was a huge success. What were your expectations for early access? Did you think it'd get as much attention as it did straight out the gates?
No, I did not. I did not think it was going to be as big as it was. I thought it was going to be like decently popular. Like I was ready for that, and I was actually really excited because this was like my first game release. So I was thinking like, oh man, like it's going to be so crazy. I can't believe my first game is going to be one that's this big.
Yeah.
Which was what I was thinking when I thought it would be much, much, much smaller than it ended up being. And then it ended up blowing up. And yeah, that really floored me. I think it surprised a lot of us. We didn't doubt that the game would do well. We had a lot of faith in it, but didn't expect it to do as well as it did. And it's been great. It's allowed so much more than than we thought we were capable of before. Like we just we have the resources to do more than we thought we would be able to do before. But we have definitely learned our lesson in not trying to scale up the company super fast. We are kind of slowly taking on more people, and growing at a steady but sustainable rate that's not you know hurting our production. We're trying to do it in a way that doesn't slow us down, which is a huge risk when you scale up really fast. So yeah, that's been nice, and we also have the resources to like look at other things that we didn't think were possible for, um, and it's just been really nice. Like you work on something, you work really hard, you put a lot of like love and like effort into something, and then like other people seem to also share that feeling with you, and that has been indescribably cool. There was like a point during like the first week of release, I think it was on like Friday or Saturday or something, when we hit 100K concurrent players,
Yeah.
and I was just like, I hit a level of like happiness and like just being so psyched that I was just like, this is it. I just can't. It's not getting any better than this. And I was right. I hit that point of happiness, and I was just like that for like the whole rest of the launch, and it couldn't go any higher. I was just
No.
capped. It was a really interesting experience. I had only had maybe that feeling like one other time, and that was like when I got married.
Yes.
So yeah.
All right. But you mentioned that it's like gave you more resources and room to do things that maybe you thought you didn't. Have we seen anything in the game so far that's like a direct result of like, okay, we can do this now. We have a
I
bunch of
think
resources.
I can't say for sure, because like development is complicated.
Yeah.
There's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of going back and forth. I think what it gave, maybe not in terms of resources necessarily, but in terms of confidence,
Yeah.
it really made us confident that we were going in the right direction, and also a lot of the feedback and like the patterns we noticed made us very confident. Like it was very obvious in like the gameplay hours and when people tended to drop off of the game, very obvious that it was happening at points that we had iterated on the game less, which told me at least that what we're doing is working. Like when we put more development time into an area and when we're iterating on it more, we're getting closer into a game that makes people want to play it more for longer. So those areas just needed more work, and we knew that if we just kept working on them and put our effort into them, they would continue, they would get better. I think like I'm not sure we would have had the confidence, for instance, to do the floors, like multiple floors, because it was such a massive undertaking. If we didn't have the kind of confidence boost from like knowing that what we were doing was working and having faith that we could do it or at least attempt it, you know. So maybe not in terms of resources. There are things that we're working on that I can't talk about yet that are a direct result of that. But we'll see.
Was there ever any doubt as to whether you were going to go into early access or not early on in production?
That I'm not sure about, just because I wasn't really there that early in.
Yeah.
Like by the time I had joined the team, we were planning to go into early access for sure. But it's possible that early on they thought like maybe we could just finish the game all the way through, but that's really tough to do for a company that doesn't have like a massive backing.
Yeah.
Early access was most likely the plan early on, especially because for a game like ours, especially because we, as a developer, had never worked on a survival game before. This was a huge departure from like what we've done. Like it has the PvP aspects, but we have so much PvE aspects. We have so much like all the survival elements. Like these are all things we had like never done before. So and was part of the reason we took on the challenge in the first place. So I think the sort of feedback that we get from early access and the ability to iterate on like our ideas and the safety that kind of provides, I think that was probably an idea early on.
Yeah, I'm happy it is. I've been enjoying early access a lot, but when I started playing early access, like the first, I don't know, third of the game or something, I was like, what the hell? This game is done.
We got a lot of that, which is a huge compliment. But we don't agree that it's done. Obviously, after Gloomrot, I think it's much more obvious what we meant when we were like, yeah, it's not done.
Yeah.
There's so much more stuff we can add, and I think obviously people who have gotten to Endgame and experienced like there isn't that much of a loop there, to like really work with. There isn't that much of the game doesn't really finish, and
exactly.
we want it to have like a real point where you're like, I have completed this game. I know we've gotten there.
Yeah.
Which can, of course, have stuff that happens after that. It needs that feeling.
Yeah, it playing the game, it became more apparent later on in the game that, okay, there are things here that needs to be worked on. But like I said, the first chunk of the game was like it felt finished. And also in terms of performance, like there's not a lot of bugs and glitches and crashes, Having played video games for a while, you've played a few early access releases, and some of them are kind of rough. But
yeah, we try. We try. We actually tried to get more of a head start on it this time. We started beta testing earlier. We tried to get out bugs more and faster and really try and make it so we had as few critical things on launch of the patch as possible. There are still some that we're still working on. I have like a hotfix list on my other screen right here that we're looking through and we're currently testing.
I have one in my castle right now that I'm I can't get rid of. I can talk.
There's one in mine where there's just like a spot that I just can't build a tile. And I'm just living with that right now. It's just I made it into like a little room that we just don't talk about.
Okay.
But for the most part, with how complex the game is, I feel like we could be doing a lot worse bug-wise.
Oh yeah.
And there's some performance stuff that we're working on. There's a little bit of bottlenecking that we know we have a pretty good idea of how to fix, but requires a pretty big change. So we're working on that. We're working towards that right now. So for any of you who are still having FPS issues, we're so on it. We're on top of it. We're getting there. Just thank you for your patience. We're getting there.
All right, that's good to hear. So I want to make one last comparison back to Battle Rights, having played that game so much going into this.
Hmm.
So the thing I think about a lot is that Battle Right was an online PvP game, right? That
Hmm.
was the entire thing, and it required active players to keep coming back to it for the game to work.
Yes.
And in time, that player base dwindled.
Hmm.
V Rising can be played solo, but a big part of its appeal is the multiplayer aspect, whether it's
Yeah.
co-oping the PvP or playing co-oping the PvE or playing PvP. So you're kind of in a similar situation still. What are your thoughts on that?
It's actually not that similar. It's actually so depending on how you look at it, because people play our games in different ways.
Yeah.
We have a few like very different types of players, and it isn't the situation where there is a queue, which I think is a
Yeah.
massive difference. Like there's not a queue, there is an MMR. There isn't you don't have like a critical mass of players that you need on all the time to keep it going. Even when numbers dwindle pretty low, as long as there's enough people to fill a server in a region with decent enough ping, you can have like an amazing experience. Uh, so I wouldn't say we're in anywhere near the same position as we would be if we were like an active PvP game. But I think what we need is more focus on making, like, for instance, hosting private servers easier, making to sort of give people the um, specific settings that they find the most fun. Because, like, there's a lot of different ways to modify the settings. That's very much intentional. We do intend people to not necessarily stick just to our official servers, but go to private servers and like find that perfect experience for you. Um, so I think making that better will make it easier to support, honestly, smaller populations if
Yeah.
they want. We don't want to make this, we're not interested in making this a live service game. We're a small team that would require moderating so many servers, which we can, we're doing the best we can to keep those, but it's just not realistic. There's so many things that are better handled on private servers, and I think those can sustain more players and more player numbers if we make private servers easier to host, easier to understand, easier to get in contact with your admins, easier to moderate. So the number of players overall, I think, is less important than just having a really good infrastructure for supporting as many players as want to play. I think it would be good to keep the numbers up more in the future, but we definitely don't panic when the numbers drop. Because especially in games in the survival genre, people come back when you post up the content.
Yeah.
When you release something new, they come back, they play for a while. A lot of people drop off, some people stay, and I think the key in the future, especially after 1.0, will be finding a good way to support those players, make sure people have people to play with, and keep them coming back, and have a good end game loop that will keep them in. But not necessarily expecting everyone to treat this as the only game they ever have to play, which is just, I think, super unrealistic.
Yeah. One thing about that that can be a bit of a chore right now is that if the population on the server you're playing on starts to go down now and you want to play on another more populated server, you have to start everything over, right? And do that
Hmm.
early game grind again. And I think it was in the Gloomrot survey you sent out that you asked a bit
Hmm.
about moving characters between servers.
Yeah.
Is that
Uh,
something you're actively working on?
I wouldn't say we're actively working on it. I would say it's something that we're thinking about and we're considering, because some of the issues you run into comparing us to other survival games
Yeah.
is there's a lot of survival games that require you to reset all the time, over and over and over. You're constantly resetting. It's just part of the game, which can be fine in a game, where it doesn't have as much progression tied to it, right?
Yeah.
Like the difference between those games and V Rising is V Rising, one, it has a ton of progression tied to your castle. Your castle is like
Yes.
a part of your character practically. So it's losing that and having to rebuild that, requires a lot of work compared to like a lot of other survival games. Uh, And also, your character itself, you have to unlock all your abilities, and now we have like gems, which, are jewels that get tied to your abilities, which you have to like farm up. So the sort of like having to restart is more painful in our game than it is in a lot of other survival like games. So we're trying to think of different ways that we can, alleviate that frustration. Whether that comes as a way to transfer over to servers that allow server transfers, how much you're allowed to transfer, that sort of thing. And if there's an infrastructure to do that, because right now we have absolutely no infrastructure that would allow that. We'd have to build a whole new thing for that. So just looking at different options, like seeing like if this is something that we would want to work on, will people actually want it? Like would it actually be a good solution to that problem, or are there other ways we can tackle that? So game design is a lot of trying to think sideways and find solutions to problems. And that is one potential solution, but I would by no means say that we're actively working on it.
All right. We'll keep a lookout for that in the future. I personally think it would be kind of cool if you could do that. But yeah, like you said, it's not like other games. Mm-hmm. Like, hey, I'm on this new server and here's my entire castle. Where can I put it?
And especially finding some sort of solution to that, it would be pretty tough, right? Like, castle areas, they look different. Would we just give you like the same stuff to like rebuild it, or the same amount of materials that you brought from a castle or something? There's ways to look at it. We'll think about it. We're thinking about it. If there is a solution, we will try to find it.
Sounds good. But you just released Secrets of Gloomrot, and by the looks of it, it's been received very well. It was a very big update. How far from finished would you say that you think the game is now? We talked earlier about you not agreeing at all in the beginning that the game is finished. And now after Gloomrot, we see that you've done a ton of work, but how about now? How far away are you, would you say?
I guess when we say like finished, would be like what we view as like a 1.0 sort of situation, which I want to be like super clear. When we get to like finished, we still intend to keep updating the game and adding on more to it, because like V-Rising is the type of game you can just keep adding stuff forever. There's like so many different avenues we can add to like keep expanding on systems, bring them closer to sort of like the vampire fantasy we're imagining. There's ways to overhaul things and ways to like update things. So whatever 1.0 is not the end of everything.
That's cool.
But thank you. But I think our 1.0 would be whatever has that like ending I was talking about, which could be this upcoming next big patch that we're really getting into now. I wish I could give like a definitive answer for that, for like this update and our next planned update. We have sort of a pretty general idea of what we want to do with them, but like we're currently in sort of a planning stage where we're really nailing down exactly what we want to get in. And that could mean that this ends up being our 1.0. That would not be crazy to imagine by any stretch. But maybe it's the next one. So I would say how close the game is to finished. I mean, probably within a few years. We're definitely getting there. We aren't really trying to stay in early access for very long. Like we're trying to get out of it sooner rather than later. And we are trying to but we're not going to do that if we're not satisfied with like the state of our game. So it's hard to give a super definitive time on that, but that's where our heads are at right now. We're building out this next patch and trying to decide exactly what we can fit in it in the time we have to like do it. And that will be a lot towards determining where our finished game is.
Yeah. I want to remember one dev update not too long ago. You had like a picture of 3 updates coming, where it's like Gloomrot is the first, and then update 2, update 3. Kind of like some sort of a not too detailed roadmap.
I would say very not detailed.
But is that still the plan right now, that you have like these
Yeah,
two
yeah,
big updates
absolutely.
that are left that you're working
Yes.
on right now.
Yeah. So basically, the idea of like the two updates that we're looking at right now is focusing on the major parts of the game that we still have left to add, which I think most people would agree are probably around like finding that definitive end for the game, and also having like a uh, dominant like end game loop, like something after you finish the game, when you're at the end, when you're on a server with people and you've got all your stuff, what do you do then?
Yeah.
That's like the biggest question that we get, of course, is like, I still want to keep playing. Give me something to do.
Yeah.
The common it's between those two updates, we want to do those. Whether or not what ends up specifically in each one is something we are still discussing and we're still working on and still developing towards. But I feel like we have got a good start on it now. I can't wait to be able to say more in the future. Like maybe we can get together another time, in like a
I
few
was
months
thinking the
and talk
same
about it.
thing. Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah, I would love to give more specifics. Yeah, in the future we'll be able to do that. But for right now, this is very much a feedback and planning stage, and we try to give ourselves some flexibility down the line to adapt. There was a lot of that with Gloomrot, so hopefully, with how well Gloomrot was received, this strategy continues to work for us. Our big updates, and then that are kind of far apart.
Yeah.
But maybe after 1.0, we'll be looking into a different update schedule to more keep people with us. Like give them a
Yeah.
little bit of content to keep them around for smaller updates in between the big ones. We'll see that going forward.
All right. Well, that feels like a pretty good note to end on, I'd say.
Great.
This has been really informative, interesting, and very pleasant.
Oh, thank you.
So,
I try to think that I'm very pleasant.
yeah, I can confirm. I can confirm. But yeah, is there anything else you'd like to say to anyone watching this before we shut things down here?
Yeah, I mean, I guess so. I don't I don't have a SoundCloud. I don't have anything to plug. But
I was
we
waiting for your
uh
SoundCloud, man.
yeah, my album drops this Thursday. No, I thank you guys so much for playing our game. It's been a wild ride so far, and the responses I get and the amount of love we get has been incredible. I really can't state enough that I'm used to coming from like a sort of heavy PvP background. I see how people respond to things in general, and every time we release something or a piece of news or whatever, I always have this instinct that I'm like, they're gonna shred me apart, they're gonna tear me apart, and the quote retweets, I'm gonna be ripped to shreds. But everybody is like so nice every single time. They're so super pleasant, and some people are angry. Those people tend to just be super passionate. And usually when I actually talk to them, they calm down a lot and they're just happy to be like heard.
Yeah.
So, just like thank you guys so much, and please keep being the way you're being, because it's been like an absolute dream to be a community manager for this company and for this game. So, thanks a lot, guys.
All right. Thank you, Jeremy.